So the way I communicate, first of all, I always tell the whole team, guys, don't think I'm crazy, because always got these crazy ideas. I think about water. What sort of planet could be underwater? I'm always like super excited. What I always do is I go back and write a script of a story that I want to tell. Because I come from a background of a filmmaker, my scripts sometimes they're not structured well like comic books. I always provide more information, and then when I meet with Gary, I share my script when I finish in a Dropbox. He checks it out. We have a Zoom chat about the characters, the story arc, and where we want to take people. How do we keep things exciting and really original? And then once we're on the same page, we break that down, and then we keep some of the information for the next issue of Bits of War. Talking about Bits of War, we've already, me and Gary, structured what's going to happen till issue 10. That's how far I've gone. I leave little Easter eggs so that I can always expand on the universe in future. And that's something me and Gary really work well together. And then we get our artist involved. Our artist, Ben Wilsonham, he first needs to get inspiration from me. So I do sketches. Quite embarrassing. I'm not the best artist, but I will draw a sketch of a character, of a universe, and then I'll show him. What I've tried to do with Bits of War is use the beautiful landmarks of Scotland and Congo where I come from to draw as inspiration to create like either motherships or spaceships. So there's that sort of hidden message behind it. So if I explain to people, look, the mothership is a Finston crane from Scotland, and they were like, oh, actually, that's the shape. I like to communicate that with the artists. So take these pictures, go outside in Glasgow, Edinburgh, take pictures of real locations, put them in the Dropbox. And when we're going each page of the story, he has to go to that location and make sure that these stories take place there so people can recognize these streets. Reasons why I do that with the artists as well is because I really want people of Scotland and people who visit Scotland, or people from around the world who read the comic book who might not know about Scotland and get a chance to ever visit. When they read the comic book, they will feel connected to the story because they can pick up and see these streets and these locations. And I feel like I wanted to really ground the character there and have these real locations so people of Scotland as well can connect with the story. So I'm always looking for originality. And then Rob Jones, who's our letterer, he does an amazing job. He comes later when we finish putting everything together, and he starts putting all the bubble dialogue to the comic book. So it's a very exciting process. And I feel like every day when we get to work on a new comic book, it's always something new to learn. We're always looking for different ways to make the comic book really exciting and new and fresh ideas. So it's a very exciting process, and lots of emails, but I can't complain. I like it.
I feel like, again, with experience, I've learned a lot about the kinds of people and organizations that I want to work for, and the kinds of people and organizations that I don't want to work for. And collaboration is a really great word, I think. I love working on projects on my own, but I love collaborating, and I love communicating, and I love exploring ideas with different people. And a lot of the comics-based work, for example, that I do isn't with people that are in the industry, which is really fun because I'm getting a completely different perspective and take on things. I love this idea of using comics as a bridge between different worlds, different disciplines, as a way of communication. I love that magic you get when you've got a team of people and you're all willing to let go of enough of your ego, I suppose, to explore something really fully and see what happens. I love the saying 1 + 1 = 3. So, when the sum of all the parts ends up being bigger than any of you could have imagined in the beginning. And to me, I find that really exciting, and what I value about collaborating with people. Through my practice, I've really honed in on the kinds of people and projects that I want to work on because they help bring me alive, and hopefully I can contribute to their world as well. And I find that really exciting.
It's different every project, that communication, but I think I've been really, really lucky that every writer I work with has just let me go for it. Like with Dan, he sent the script and he wanted me to read over it and give him any thoughts. And then I tend to do, depending often, I think, especially with a writer, whether they are also a drawer as well, depends on how formal my layouts are. So like with Dan and with Fraser Campbell, who I did Index with, I did quite formal kind of thumbnails and layouts to really give them an idea of what the page was going to look like. But to be fair to all of them, none of them were judgmental. They were all like, yeah, it looks great. Like, I'd be like, oh. On both counts though, there was the idea of maybe I might letter. Lettering is definitely an art I haven't fully grasped yet. Dan's had a lot of captions, and then Fraser has some quite big dialogue sections and stuff, and I definitely felt out of my depth. And I tried on Index to make sure there was enough room for lettering, and I tried to keep placing space in or bubbles and often the text so that I definitely had enough room. But Hassan Otsmain Elhel did it, and he did a brilliant job, and he got the bubbles really sympathetic with my artwork, and he placed things really well and just got that movement in a way that I think it takes a lot of skill to get right. That's a really interesting communication between the kind of writer and the letterer. I haven't worked with a lot of editors. I worked with Shelley Bond on a couple of things. I did Hey Amateur. She was my first one where I had to give in a panel by panel script. I had to immediately say to her, look, 9 panel grids, just give me the fear. Can I not put them in boxes? I will absolutely do it in that format, but the idea of 9 boxes is just like, stress levels. But it was really amazing to work with an editor and have it come back with like red notes and the red pen and be like, this needs to change and this doesn't make sense to American audiences and she was so spot on, and her knowledge of grammar is just astonishing. Lizzie Kay, who's now at Cast Iron, was my editor at Unbound, and equally she was the same. She kind of just let me go for it. I think she'd seen 3 or 4 chapters by then, so she knew exactly what I was doing and what it was going to look like, and then just left me to do the rest, which was great, because then when I sent it to her for the proofread, it was fresh. Yeah, so it's a changeable thing, but I think every project you've just got to kind of from the start be honest about how you work, how you're going to hand over work. Like with Jeff, it was such a nice person. I'm so grateful for him giving me this opportunity. But with him, it was just, I'm not a fast artist, and I had to say, look, I'm not that. I am. Take my time, once I get drawing, it's really fast, but the layouts are slower and the script is slower. So long as you keep people informed about their expectations and you manage what they can expect from you, then it's generally pretty smooth. But you've got to be just really open about it, and then it's all easy after that, I think.
Most of the stuff that I do, the only collaborators on my comics are editors who I speak to. A freelance editor, Claire Napier, who I hired for Finding Home, and then obviously with the publisher is someone who's like part of the project. So I basically just always do, most of what I do is by email, because I tend to be able to think more clearly that way. And then if I'm stuck, I will also do like digital calls where I'm like, help, I don't know what I'm doing with this. I'm not sure I understand what's happening here. Yeah, and I also think even for like other sort of like illustrated books and things that I'm an editor on, that tends to be the same thing, like mostly by email. But obviously for some people, talking it out can be helpful, even if it's not even to like really get the answers to something. It's just like having to verbalize something can help it all come together. So I tend to do like both when I'm the editor and the editee, like the chance to be like, we can talk about this out loud if you want to, but mostly email otherwise.
Working on a project for a publisher, then it makes much more sense, obviously, to sort of like speak with them as much as possible with regards to it. And I think a lot of people, particularly if they are new to the industry, are very, very scared of stepping on people's toes, or are really, really scared of like disappointing an editor or a publisher. What I really, really want to get across is that editors and publishers are not your enemy. They just want to know what's going on. So even if you've got like something crazy going on in your personal life, oh, actually, I don't know if I can deliver this on time, whatever, just tell them as soon as possible, because the worst thing that any artist can possibly do is just like disappear or just go AWOL. All publishers, they set certain deadlines in the contracts just to sort of like to give themselves a lot of wiggle room. Even after an artist has delivered those pages, it still needs to go through graphic design, it still needs to go through the book designer and all of that. When a publisher says to you, this is the deadline, and of course in the contract it sounds very, very scary and very, very formal. Seriously, there will always be the odd delay here and there. And to be honest, if it's just a delay of a week or 2, it's very, very rare that there's ever going to be a problem with that. So, I mean, that's the one thing I'll definitely say, whenever you're working for a client or for a project, or particularly, for a book and for a publisher, always, always talk with your editor. The editor also is there to make or hone or polish your book to the best it can be. Sometimes you may need to hear some hard truths, but ultimately they want to get it into a format which means that people will enjoy it, people will understand it, people will sort of resonate with it. Any book sort of needs some editing. So even when I'm working with my own personal projects, I will do it all, but it goes through at least 2 other people. There's also sort of like, okay, it's one thing when you're working with an editor or a publisher and they ask you to change something and you might not like it. You can argue your point for it. That's absolutely fine. You know, you have a discussion, or in my case, no. So that's happened a couple of times with me and some of my writers, but it's only because they've written something in a way where I just go, actually, you know, if you write it like that, then I don't get to show this bit. Or like, oh, but I think I could really, really focus on this if I make this the really big money shot of the comic here. You know, so it's not like I disagree with what they're writing per se. It's more that I think, oh, actually, you've written in something which is redundant, or you focus on something when actually visually this would work a bit better. You know, so you have a bit of a discussion with your writer or with your editor if they've perhaps misunderstood something, or like giving you some feedback and they might have misunderstood sort of like, you know, how the direction you wanted to take it. Generally speaking, if you do get the feedback and stuff from your friends, from your colleagues, from your editors, particularly if more than one person is saying it, that's very, very important. If independently both people have sort of noticed the same problem, then you definitely need to work on that. But you know, if it's a small thing and if they say a little something, then you know, it's up to you really. It's you kind of like, you know, there's different tiers of kind of feedback and stuff that you need to get changed. But yeah, you know, we're human. Whenever in doubt, always just like talk to someone. Always talk.
I'm a really big fan of like super honest, open communication. I think everybody wins when you're really clear about what you want. And I think it's really important to communicate what's the vision, what do you want? There's a lot of amazing people in comics and also really amazing people that I work with and have worked with across everything. And they've always got exceptional ideas and really great stuff to come forward. So I am a really, probably to a fault, a very open communicator. I want people to know what's going on. I want to talk about something. And I also always want to work on projects where what I'm planning to do stands up to other people's ideas and inputs. So like if I'm like, I really, really want to do this project, what do you think? Like running it through other people can be so helpful, and that kind of mentorship aspect that you get from that is so valuable because you can apply it to other things as well. Jenny Kumar from Literature Alliance Scotland helped me out with some mentorship stuff, but also totally mentored me herself, and she's become like a total confidant who I can be like, what do you think about this idea? And the same with Philippa, who I have worked with at Scottish Book Trust for I think over 3 years now. Any idea I have, I'm always super comfortable to be like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? I really favour communication from people who can think very creatively and think very broadly about things. I am one of those people that can be a really excitable puppy when it comes to like event ideas. And if somebody matches that energy, I feel indestructible. So, and you find that from communicating with people and being like, I don't think this is really, like, this might be really dorky. You might think this really isn't cool, but I think it's really cool. Do you think it's cool? And then when you have that moment when somebody's like, yes, it's the best feeling ever. I love talking to people about projects.
I feel like the collaboration works that I've done are mainly, like, pretty exclusively have been licensed work with other people, and then I've done creator-owned stuff with Steph, my partner. Most of the stuff I work on now is with Steph. We're a creative duo, but we're also like engaged and live together, which is amazing. It means like we work side by side, so communication on that, whenever we need to talk or figure something out, I'm just like literally turn my head and be like, hey, what do you think of this? Or if Steph's seen something, like it's immediate, like we can go through stuff, we can work through stuff together, and it's really nice. But with other work that I've worked on, I've written a tiny bit of Sonic the Hedgehog. I've done Invader Zim with Sarah Stern on colours. I did a Rick and Morty volume with backup strips I wrote for Mark Ellaby. And me and Steph wrote Marvel Action Spider-Man, a volume of it, where we worked with a bunch of wonderful people on that project. And I think mainly as well, I did Minecraft with Swayar Monster. They've written it, and I've done the artwork for it. And with those projects, like, it's weird. Like, I meet people at Comic-Con, and they're like, you must be so tight with this person you've made a book with. And it's like, I didn't talk to them that much during the project. And I think that's because with licensed stuff, it goes through so many levels of approval. So I mainly just work with the editor on the project. But it's also been wonderful. I met Sway at Emerald City Comic-Con. I met Sarah Stern at New York Comic-Con. I meet a lot of people I work with, like at Comic-Con later on afterwards. It's really cool to connect then. But like during the project, it's like I'm like with Minecraft, I'm mainly working with Chantal Laurette, and just having all that dialogue there. So I write for a licensed thing, I drew for a licensed thing. My experience with writing for a big licensed property is that there's a lot of revisions, there's a lot of tightening up stuff and working through with licensing and editors and stuff. So I can see maybe why those decisions get made at that stage. Whereas I imagine it's probably a lot different working on a create your own project, because you're like, I know the rules of this universe because I'm making them up. It's been an interesting experience, and it's been really nice working with staff. We've done Donut the Destroyer together. We do our Super Adventure together and Buy and Subscribe together, and the Secret Project I can't talk about together. And it's really cool collaborating in the room, and we do so much talking and back and forth and having to figure things out. So it's quite funny, but yeah, it just varies from project to project.
I sort of made a decision a while back that I wasn't going to draw any more projects that I wasn't the writer of, because artistry is really hard. I'm not a good artist. I think I'm a good comics creator, but I don't think I'm a good artist in terms of maintaining a professional work relationship. I think I tend to not want to do stuff. I think I'm generally like, actually, you know what? I have a better idea than this. I'm much happier as a writer. So if I'm writing something myself, that's the only way I can be invested enough in a script in order to draw it. If it's someone else's script, I tend to not actually be that invested. That's how I know I'm not an artist. My profession will never be just solo artist, because I don't have the commitment to other people's scripts that a real artist does. Because I'm just sort of like, just throw stuff at the wall. So for me, my art at this point, I sort of decided is very much about just for my own projects that I want to draw in that way. And that's fine, because it's never going to be Alex Ross. It's never going to be like amazing. But I think I take the pressure off needing it, because when I first started drawing, it had to be like, I was trying to make it like a superhero style. I know, can you even imagine what that would be like? Taking that pressure off and realizing that that's not what I want to do. And sort of Sorara as a process was quite freeing. It was like the whole point of the project was to give myself permission to make stuff look ugly and not to try and make that look necessarily nice, and sort of not having to worry about anatomy for a bit. So all that kind of stuff is what, hopefully, if I ever get another project off the ground ever again by myself, it'll be like, I'm kind of excited to sort of delve more into the artisticness of like rubbery people and refining that a little bit, because generally sort of projects which I do are like either Sorara or 24-hour comics, because those are like sort of quick bursts of things. Working with other collaborators. So as an artist, I'm not good. And I'll just admit that straight out. I'm not a good. I always have sass. I always have a pushback on every single comment. I never want to change anything. Once I've drawn it, that's it. I've drawn it once, and I'm not changing that. So don't try and suggest more things, because I'll always have some sassy comeback about how like, you know, no, it's perfect the way I did it with no backgrounds and like wonky looking faces. That was perfect. As a writer, I like to think of myself as very benevolent. I'm quite chill, where I would sort of generally, as I sort of said, we work for hire stuff. I only work with the editor. The editor's there specifically to manage that relationship. But generally it's like, I write a script. The editor maybe has a comment or a query. I make that edit, they hand it to the artist, I kiss it goodbye, it comes out, it's really excited. But then working with someone together decided on a comic, and you've worked out the whole thing together, and it's like a jewel baby, which is what Grand Slam is. Because me and Emma worked on that together. That is quite intense. We just will spend ages on it. But I think then the reward of that is that like, it's pretty flipping good. So it works really well. Me and Emma have a great working relationship. So I don't really know how I could ever be that invested with another. Like, I feel like if I did like a proper non-work for hire project with another artist, I'd be cheating on Emma. Like, I'm not sure I could ever find it in me to do that.
So I always say that communication in academia or just in life in general is super, super key. It's really, really important. What's difficult for me is that I straddle this really thin line sort of between comic studies and biblical studies. And I come from a biblical studies background rather than from a comics background. So my biblical studies colleagues don't quite understand my work with comics, and my comic studies colleagues don't quite understand my work being based in biblical studies. And so how I deal with that, how I communicate with the collaborators, how I balance that is to look out for people who work in interdisciplinary fields as well. So any sort of interdisciplinary studies, because they will have had similar experiences. And I also have really great colleagues who are normally quite excited to learn either about comics or the Bible, and they'll often chime in with something that I hadn't thought about, again bringing a sort of interdisciplinary element. So although it's really difficult, I do find communication and the founding of a community is really key to progress in a sort of the academic world to do with comics.